and good day, good night. Welcome to Five Rings Podcast, your weekly podcast about the Olympic Games. And this week, Duane, it's our PyeongChang 2018 wrap-up show. We'll talk about the Paralympic Games that just wrapped up last weekend in PyeongChang. But first of all, this is almost a goodbye to PyeongChang altogether. How are you feeling?
You know what? I thought they did a really good job. And you're right. This is a goodbye. And that's the sort of a sad thing when it comes to the Olympics, that we sort of live in this little world for a while. And we mentioned this during the games, too, that I kind of felt that I didn't get to know PyeongChang and Korea as well as I did in the past, simply because of how we all watch the Olympics now compared to how we watched them in the past. I used to enjoy all that cultural stuff, and I suppose I could still seek that out if I wanted to, but I'm too busy trying to track down, the next sport, right? So maybe we should have taken some more time to learn about Korea and all that sort of stuff, but it is goodbye. It was a good games, but it's never goodbye forever when you come to talking about the Winter Olympics, because as we're going to talk in our last block, we can go back in a generation, maybe, who knows? And certainly I think that they deserve some credit for a good games there, Kevin.
Duane, we might have a new target. Keep 5 rings until 2026 so we can finally do an Olympic Games live there, actually, in the village.
Yeah, fair enough. Anyone wants to fly me to Tokyo, I'm sure we're both game.
Yes,
so there you go. That's cool. Kevin,
speaking of patreon.com/sportspodcast network is where you can help us monthly to maybe save some money to go to Tokyo.
Fair enough. Just real quickly, there's a great irony of those of us who love the Olympics. It's like this incredibly athletic achievement, but I track my steps like many people do every day, my movement and all that. In the month of February, I'm just looking right now, I made 30,368 steps total in the entire month. That's not very much.
Usually it's 10,000 per day. That's the goal.
Yeah, well, it's 10,000 per day, right? Is your general goal. So I only made 30,000 steps all month. So I basically sat in one place for an entire month. I've already almost 200,000 this month. So there you go. I thought that was kind of funny. Anyway, I thought I'd share that a little bit. The irony of watching the Olympics.
It is an irony, and you are compensating maybe now for the month of February that we were all a little bit more sedentary. Let's talk about PyeongChang 2018, the Paralympic Games. You did the preview show a few weeks ago, and let's start with our wood. And it's we've talked about this on a daily basis over the last few weeks and months, and on a weekly basis over the last year. It's the neutral athletes. Russia, the Olympic athletes of Russia, finished second in the medal standings, Duane, and it is deserving of your wood medal.
Look. Here's the thing. It's unfortunate for those clean athletes, those that were clean that are in Russia right now, because they're tarnished by the brush of all the dirty, right? And it's not their fault. We've said this many times before. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not. They're stuck in a situation where they have to do these things to be part of the Russian sport system. And when I look at the medals, particularly at the Paralympics, where the depth of field is smaller, I think that the influence of that doping from the past is still rearing its ugly head, because even if these athletes are clean now, the gains that they had back 3-4 years ago are still sort of pushing them over the top to get to them near the top of that medal standings, because you're looking at you go from a depth of field of thousands to a depth of field of hundreds or even tens sometimes when you're talking about the Paralympics, and that's going to have a greater sort of influence when it comes to the ability to manipulate the results through illegal means like doping. So, look, just the idea that you can't look at them with a fresh face. We've talked this to death, but it's the same thing with the Paralympics, and you got to just belabor the point, Kevin.
It's unfortunate that it has come to this, but the aspect of you're innocent until proven guilty has eroded of our minds. We have a certain fatigue towards that issue because we just don't see an end to it, and it's sad that it has come to this point.
Yeah, fair enough. I'll give an honorary wood medal real quick. And it's just the Paralympics always take a back seat, right? It is very, and we're going to talk a little bit about this in a minute, just ways that we can get more attention to the Paralympics after we give our medals out. But I remember I went home for a little bit to my parents during the Paralympics, just for a couple of days. I was back, And my father asked me, like, well, how are you watching these things? And they're not really internet savvy. They don't really look that way. And it's like he just wants to turn his TV on and watch. And it's not that easy. I mean, there was a show here in Canada that was in the early hours in the morning that you could watch for a couple hours each day, but it was a highlight package show. They showed the sled hockey gold medal game was live. You could watch that if you wanted to, but it just doesn't have the same accessibility. And I don't know what the answer is, because I get that you want to have the best facilities possible for these athletes, and having them immediately following the Olympics is helpful for that. But it also, I think, leads to a burnout from a viewership, because you just intensely watch the Olympics for 2 weeks and then a week later to gear back up. It's hard.
Could you do it before? Could you use I don't like to say use. Could the Paralympics be done before the game as an almost a second type of training run, quote unquote, like a test event almost? So the Paralympics as a whole, you go there and then you have the Olympics. So maybe that fatigue will not be there. Maybe we'll be just, our appetite will just be teased.
Yeah. I think I'll save. We can have that conversation a little bit more on the end when we talk about the topic's going to be whether we want to include them in the actual main program, like we see with the Commonwealth Games, and we will have some Commonwealth Games coverage on the Five Rings podcast. I haven't figured out exactly what that's going to look like, but certainly I have figured out the access to watch the game, so I will be doing that. Kevin, if you can as well.
It's a beginning. We know how to watch them. Now we'll be able to talk about them. All right.
Yes, exactly.
Let's move to the bronze medal for the Paralympics game as a whole. The wrap-up. It is Henrietta Fakasova from Ukraine. She won 5 medals in visual impaired alpine skiing. And I have to say, that's insane. Impaired alpine skiing is one of those sports where I don't even comprehend how they manage to just stay on their skis, never mind go fast, following their guide. It is impressive to watch. I've seen a few of it on TV, on the show you were talking about, and yeah, it was impressive to watch.
Yeah, no, it's probably the most extreme of the Paralympic sports, winter or summer, in many ways. You think about it, it's crazy enough to be a downhill skier, let alone to be a downhill skier who's blind or visually impaired. They do, in fact, it's a great trivia question as well, in terms of what's the only able-bodied athlete to win medals in the Paralympics. It's their guides, because the guides get medals too, as they should.
Yeah, and cycling really is the same thing too. Impaired vision cycling is the same. Lynn Bessette of Canada has won a medal in London, and yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's a team event sort of that way, and it's very exciting to watch. And Pakasova was the star of the games in terms of the most medals won overall. And you'll often see multiple medals won at the Paralympics. And again, it comes down to depth of field and a little bit of it's easier to cross over sports, because it just is, in the sense that there's not a lot of people that are competing in it. And it's one of the things that makes it difficult to follow the Paralympics for just sort of a casual person jumping in, is the different classifications, the different qualifications, and how you fit into this versus this, right? But it's really easy to understand how brave and how incredibly inspirational it is for someone to take a disability and turn it on its head and do something that many of us as fully able-bodied wouldn't be able to do. So certainly she deserves a lot of respect and credit for that. That is every bit as impressive as any medal you win in PyeongChang in the main events, or the main program is what I'm trying to say, in the Olympics proper. Yeah. Bakashova is our bronze medalist.
Silver, Brian McKeever of Canada, cross-country skiing, won his 13th career medal, most all-time in cross-country skiing in the Paralympic Games, and for Canada, and has a quite interesting story you can tell us about Brian McKeever and his career as a whole that could have taken a very different turn in 2010.
Yeah, most Canadians might remember McKeever from his attempts to qualify in the 50-kilometer race for Vancouver 2010, the Olympics, as opposed to the Paralympics. Yeah. He obviously qualified for the 2010 Paralympics and won several medals there. But he wanted to be on the regular Olympics as well. And I struggle with how to distinguish these two when I'm saying it. I'm not trying to be dismissive of the Paralympics when I say regular. It's just easier when we're trying to talk about them at the same time to distinguish. Just say
Olympics and Paralympics. So that way we'll distinguish. Yeah.
There you go. He tried to qualify for the Olympics in 2010 and was very, very close. He just missed the qualifying standards by just fractions of a second. It would have been a great story there. And there was a big buildup in the days to that. There was a lot of attention on him because, at the same time you think about the gentleman who I probably shouldn't mention his name anymore because of what happened after the Olympics.
Because he's in jail for killing his girlfriend. Yeah. We're not going to mention his name.
Yes, exactly. But nonetheless, it was around the same time. So certainly there was a lot of attention to that. And, he almost got there. And this is a great athlete that, as I say, he was like, fractions of a second away from qualifying for the Olympics. So the fact that he's doing this, blind is what he is remarkable. 13 career medals. That's the most all time in cross country, as Kevin said. It's the most by a Paralympian in Canadian history. It's the most Olympic medals, period, Olympic or Paralympic combined, by any Canadian athlete. So absolutely deserving. He'll get our poutine as well because he was clearly the star for Canada in this, who finished third in the medal standings behind the neutral athletes, and the USA won the medal standings in the Paralympics this time. So combined, I think that would make Canada number one in both combined and para and Olympics together. I think they had the most medals altogether. So there you go.
It's not a thing. It doesn't exist. But if it would, if it did, we would win it. We actually won the Olympics and Paralympics. We won the combined. It should be a thing.
Yeah, Norway only had 8 medals, and actually, I could almost give a mini bronze medal to that. Is how are they so successful in the Olympics and not as successful in the Paralympics? Suggests to me that they don't put enough funding in the Paralympics. I was
gonna say because they're not putting the efforts.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Still, but yeah.
Yeah. And there's not as many events as well, so 8 is more impressive than it would be if it was the Olympic Games. And you were talking about the USA, which brings us to our gold medal for the PyeongChang 2018 Paralympic Games. It's the gold medal hockey game. Surprising, shocking, 2 Canadians choosing the gold medal game as their pinnacle moment of the Paralympic Games in 2018. But that game, Canada was winning 1-0. Did not allow a goal all tournament long. There's a few minutes left. USA pulls the goalie. They score. And then the USA scored in overtime. Yeah, United States, slide hockey gold medal winners.
Do you remember in Sochi, the Canadian women in the Olympics when they were getting buried?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The U.S. has had the reverse moment in that in the sled hockey tournament. Yeah, it was a very exciting game, and the sled hockey is very exciting and very crossover appealing, and it leads into our next topic in a lot of ways. But this was certainly, we should talk about these athletes first. It was a remarkable performance that they put on, and like the women's hockey tournament, there's a lot of analogies there. There is a real big divide between Canada and the United States when it comes to how they perform vis-a-vis the rest of the world. They are quite dominant on either side of this draw. The tournament set up for them to play in the final, although ironically, this is the first time that they met in the final in any Paralympics. So it was exciting to have it happen there, for it to play out the way it did, with very heartbreaking for the Canadians. Obviously, they were seconds away. Though you said minutes, they were actually seconds away. It was like 32 seconds left or something in the game when the U.S. finally scored, and then they of course won it in overtime. So it was just a remarkable game, an exciting game. It's an exciting sport to watch. Very athletic too. The core strength it requires to keep that sled upright and be able to manipulate a puck and get
go
any
fast
power in a shot
and get any speed, because it's like skating, but your entire weight of your entire body is generating on those 2 blades in the middle of the sled, and to generate movement, the strength of the shoulder is necessary. It's crazy. If you can, and there's places you can try sled hockey as a non-Paralympic athlete, then you'll see, you'll understand and have a tremendous amount of respect and admiration to what the sled hockey Canadian national team or others can do. It is quite impressive, the skill level with this tiny, puny little stick, able to control that puck and lift it and control it like it was a ball. It's quite impressive, yeah.
For sure. Which sort of leads to where I wanted to have a final conversation on this, and it's this. We sort of alluded to it a little bit already. It's how do you get more attention to the Paralympics? And I wonder, in the Commonwealth Games, for instance, what they've done there is that they have para sports intermixed in the main program. They did that same thing with the Pan Am Games as well. The para sports were in the main program. And so that you would just, you would have a medal awarded to the ski jumper or whatever. I'm talking winter now. But then you have blind cross-country skiing medal awarded just the same way. There were less para events. They sort of just picked and choose the ones that they, I think, feel were the most, had the biggest depths of fields and had the ability to sort of generate the most interest, and they put them in the main program. I don't ever want to advocate for the elimination of the Paralympics outright. I think they need to have their own setting because there'll be more medals and more events. But I do wonder whether there is room for some para sports with full medal status. That's the key, to be put into the main event. And one that I would look at would be sled hockey, because I think it has a lot of crossover appeal in terms of really appealing to, it'd be intuitive to people. It'd be exciting to people to watch. And it would be right there. You know, it would be very TV friendly. And I think that might be one way to generate more attention. But I'm not sure. I don't know.
I just don't know if there's the risk versus reward factor. If you look at it this way, if you put it outright as a medal that counts for the class for the classification of medals too, it does bring an amount of, well, we're gonna have to police now and set really threshold of, okay, you can qualify for this para sport or not. Okay, well, you don't have the para sports qualifications, but can you still be there? Will we have ringers in the team? You know, so then it has to be police, and it becomes very complicated, and it becomes almost an issue as well morally. Where does it end? Paralympic sports were created to give Paralympic athletes a place where they can thrive and surpass themselves and try to go for gold. If you bring them into the Olympic fold, and there's maybe an influx of athlete that would have not necessarily used a certain aspect of their training and to try to pass for parasport or ringers, like I would call it. So I'm afraid of that. But maybe we should be better. Maybe parasport should not be just parasport. It should be just sport, like sled hockey. Could it be sled hockey? I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, well, this is an idea that has popped in my head as well. You look at sled hockey, and I'm not an expert in terms of the physiology of this, in terms of the sport physiology of this, and whether being able-bodied would give you an advantage or not. I can't imagine it would, though, because there's really no use of the legs at all.
Exactly. Imagine, sorry to be blunt, and I'm sorry if this is not going to sound politically correct. Example, if you have 2 legs amputated, you don't weigh as much, which means you're lighter on your side, which means you can go faster, so there would be advantage to Paralympic athletes to be able to compete against non-Paralympic athletes, right?
That's my take on it. And maybe you have sled hockey in the Paralympics that's restricted to those that meet the criteria, and you have a sled hockey event which is just open, and that would provide an opportunity for Paralympians to compete on an equal standing
and truly feel included, and not just the show after.
Yeah, and I don't know. Like, I'm not an advocate for this. I'm a sports fan.
We're thinking out loud. Yeah, we're just thinking out loud, brainstorming. Could that be could that be a good idea?
And maybe there's reasons for this that those that are advocates for parasport might point out to us. And if you're listening to this and doing that, let us know. But certainly, I think there's room for that. You do see in the Olympics, the Summer Olympics, you do see the occasional disabled athlete competing with able-bodied athletes in the Olympics. Generally in the shooting sports, you've seen it in archery with a few athletes that have done so in wheelchairs. You've seen some visually impaired athletes competing in sports where, surprisingly enough, but they're able to do so. I think that there's been some athletes in the equestrian events that have had conditions that might qualify for the Paralympics in the past as well. So there's possibility for crossover there, and I just think that if you take some sports that have an excitement and have a TV appeal, it's a way that you could promote the Paralympics while still allowing these athletes the opportunity to compete in front of the bright lights of the Olympics and get that full attention. Wheelchair basketball might be another option too. Now, when I'm saying this, I'm adding to the Olympic program, which is already bloated. So I know that there's those issues there, but I just think there's got to be ways you can get more attention for this. And you mentioned, maybe we'll end with this, like the possibility of having it before the games rather than after. I don't mind that one either. I just don't want it to ever seem like it's, the opening act, so to speak, right? Like, no one goes to watch if you go buy a ticket to watch your favorite band, you might show up in time to watch the very end of the opening act, but you're not necessarily as invested in it. So I would worry about that. I wonder whether having it, instead of on the 2s and 4s, having it on the 3s and 5s.
Yeah. No, yeah, it could be. It could be. We'll see if that happens. But it's an interesting aspect. All right, so that wraps up pretty much our PyeongChang 2018 coverage as a whole here on Five Rings. We'll see you at the Commonwealth Games for amateur sports as a whole. But Duane, now let's take a very, very short break. And when we come back, we'll talk about United 2026 and Calgary 2026. Both? Canada? Jeez. So there's a possibility that in 2026, Edmonton will be the center of the sports world for a few months.
For sure, yeah. Obviously, the United World Cup 2026 bid is something that on Soccer Today, our soccer program, that we've talked about a great deal. But if you're only a listener to Five Rings, I thought that it was worthwhile to have a conversation. Now, the vote for this is going to happen in June. Right now, we're in the final stretch run where the folks are out there trying to get the votes. If you're not familiar with how this voting structure is going to work this time, unlike past World Cup bids, which we all know that there was a little shady stuff going on, just like in the Olympic bidding process back in the day. They had what they called the EXCO, which was the executive committee, which was a limited amount of people that were very influenceable. I don't know if that's a word, but you know what I mean. That they voted for it. Now every confederation or every sort of federation has a vote. So it's one nation, one vote. So right now you have these folks going around to city around the world to try and drum up support for the United bid versus Morocco. We're hearing here in Canada, which is one of the bidding countries, along with the United States and Mexico for the United bid, that things aren't going great, and that there's a lot of sort of support for the Morocco bid. And I thought that we'd start there, Kevin. I mean, we've talked about this in Soccer Today, so it's hard to distinguish what we want to go with here versus what we've gone with there. But let's just ask you. I sort of put my opinion out the other day. I don't think we really heard from you. Where do you think this is? Do you think that should be worried about the 2026 bid for North America, or do you think we should be excited about the fact that it might go to Morocco?
Both are very fascinating to me because they're almost bids at both end of the spectrum of possibilities and ideologies of how you can present a bid for a big event, how you want to host and how you want to organize a big event, like an Olympic Games, like a World Cup. United States, Mexico, and Canada are putting forward a bid that we can call a sustainable build, because they're not going to build anything. They're going to bid for things that they already build. Talking about Montreal, BMO Field in Toronto, and Edmonton. We're talking about big stadiums across the United States and Mexico that are already built either recently or have been up for a while and will have a bit of renovations to them, a new coat of paint, as we would say here on the Five Rings podcast. But that's about it. The difference is Morocco, and the bid for Morocco is the exact opposite. New stadiums, opulence, crazy amounts of money invested in stadiums that will probably become white elephants after. So it's like those two ideologies. And we'll see if what is called Agenda 2020 on the Olympic side and what could be called a streamlining, well, because of the corruption scandals, FIFA has no choice but eventually have to find ways to do things in transparency. And those two things are clashing in this bid. Who's gonna win? And you add the political aspect of the turmoil that's going on with the American presidency, as we were talking about over the last few years, and what will happen in the next few years. Because when you vote for a bid, you don't just think now, you think in the next 2, 4, 6, 8 years, which you're confronted to. So there's that discomfort that could be seen, and there's the lack of inclusion for actual Canada and United States, and Mexico versus United States. If I am a country in the rest of the world and I'm looking at this bid, I'm like, yeah, you're saying you're a united bid, but you're not. Trust your partners. Just don't give them a party. Give them a full spot. 10-10-60 does not seem fair And I think that's going to weigh into the decision process of those countries when they vote. Like, yeah, you say you're united. It's a veil. It's smoke and mirrors. It's a U.S. World Cup, and call a spade a spade. So the more I hear what's going on across the world, the more it makes me a bit worried. But still, it has to be coherent. We've talked, and FIFA and the IOC, which I know is two different things, but it's the same ideology with the status of the economical world that we live in. They have to make things a bit easier and streamlined and not as big, not as grandiose, not as opulent, and maybe a bit more for everyone. And that's a bit of the message of United 2026. So we'll see who wins at the end. Is it money or is it unison?
Look, the day that Sepp Blatter stood up and held up a little placard or a little card that said Qatar on it was the day that we've left any delusion that FIFA voted with its head. They vote with their wallet and with their wallet, basically. They
their wallet and their ego.
Yeah. The United 2026 bid, and look, full disclosure, obviously we're in Canada. There would be something for us to gain here. We'd be able to watch a World Cup in our own country. We'd likely get a host spot, although that apparently isn't 100% guaranteed.
Likely.
Yeah, likely get a host spot, which is something that we'd both like to see. So there's obviously, some investment here personally. But that said, I think that if you just take a step back, and you look at the 48 teams and you look at Morocco and their infrastructure and what they'd have to build, it doesn't make a lot of sense to put this World Cup there. It doesn't make a lot of sense to put a 48-team World Cup in any single country moving forward, unless it's Germany, France, England, like a country that has existing massive soccer infrastructure, stadiums. Right?
Yeah, like you have 20 stadiums built already that you can host all those games. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so for a country like Morocco, any country in the world moving forward to host this singularly is going to be very difficult. So that, I think, if they're voting with their head at all, it should tip the balance to the United 2026 bid. But as I said, that sort of stuff goes out the window.
That's unlikely. The head of the snake might have been cut, but the replacement is not necessarily less sneaky.
Yeah. Quickly, there was a press conference. The Morocco bid has been remarkably quiet. I have been trying to hunt down for about 4 weeks now anyone to talk to about the Morocco bid. There is really very little people that are reporting on the ground about it. There's no media contact for them to get a hold of the bid. There's nothing. Like they're just sort of there. And they're probably, doing their own little work outside of it, but they are completely outside the public's vision, which is not ideal from a transparency standpoint, obviously. They did finally have a press conference yesterday. It was a teleconference. It was on a shaky video stream that was like blurry and jumpy. They didn't have any Q&A that was available to anyone who wasn't in the room. So all of this stuff was just kind of like dodgy and not particularly, reassuring to anyone who feels that they have the capabilities of hosting this thing. But I don't think that stuff matters. I don't think it matters to the voters. The African bloc's going to vote for Africa just because it's Africa. So that's 50 votes right there. And then it's going to come down to politics. And we talked about this a little bit yesterday, Kevin. It's like whether South America is going to make a deal with some countries to sort of say, well, we'll vote for Morocco this time if you vote first for 2030 because they want to host the Centennial World Cup in Uruguay and Argentina. So like there's a whole bunch of stuff that we're just not going to know until this plays out. Logically, it should be the United bid. Logic doesn't matter when you're talking about FIFA.
Logic has gone out the window a long time ago when it's about elections and voting for a lot of things over the last few years. Which brings us now, Duane, to 2026 could be a big year for Canada too. If, example, the World Cup is in Canada, like it would be in Edmonton in Alberta, and another event that could maybe take place in Alberta as well is the Winter Olympic Games, maybe in Calgary. Why not? In Calgary, 88, 2000, hashtag math, 40,
28 years.
28 years after.
Right? Yeah.
28, yeah, 28. 38 years after.
Yeah.
What would it be? Yes, it would be. Who cares?
Yeah.
2026.
28, you'd be like younger than you are.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. No, exactly. So Calgary 2026 could be a thing. And then this bid would go with the idea of Agenda 2020 when it goes to the Olympic Games, using a already existent infrastructures that would be put up to today's standards, and then you would have an Olympic Games that's easier to organize. The lack of want or the lack of will of countries and cities to bid for the Winter Olympic Games over the last few years has opened up the eyes and mind of the IOC. And a Calgary downsized type of Olympic bid could be potentially a good one.
Yeah, look, there'd be some builds that would need to happen. They need to retrofit the Olympic Park a little bit there. They need to. There's already talk about moving the ski jump to Whistler, actually to the 2010 site, because the cost to retrofit the 88 site would be close to what it would cost to build a new one. They haven't, for those who don't know, the 88 site only has a small hill now. The large hill has been out of commission for about 20 years. They built it. They didn't really think when they built the damn thing, because Canada wasn't, isn't to this day a ski jumping company. So they built the ski jumping facility in the middle of like a wind tunnel. And if you remember back to 88, if you're old enough to remember back to 88,
there were crashes all over the place. I watched it a few weeks ago as a pure just. I wrote ski jump fails on YouTube. Guess what came up?
Yeah, the wind was awful, and they had a lot of cancellations, and it took forever to get the events in. There's also just more events going on in Calgary. They'd probably keep what they'd probably do is they retrofit the Saddle Dome, the host of the 88 hockey again. It's probably into the curling venue and the figure skating venue, and then they'd build a new hockey rink, which the Flames, the NHL Calgary Flames, would play in afterwards. So that's how they deal with that. They want a new hockey rink anyway.
I think the whole idea of hosting the Olympics is to get the hockey rink, because that's the only way they'll get the arena. They've been trying to get that arena built for years and years. Brian Burke, president of hockey operations for Calgary Flames, has been trying to get this thing built since before he knew how to tie his own tie. So that's a long, long time ago. And he's been arguing with the media and the city council in Calgary, saying, look, we need a stadium. Edmonton got one. Why not us? We need our arena. So maybe hosting the Winter Olympics will finally get Brian Burke his arena.
Yeah, and the Saddle Dome is, other than the ACC, is the NHL rink that I've been the most in. It's not a bad rink in terms of viewing and that. It's nice view vantage points. It's, comfortable, but it doesn't have any of the amenities that a modern rink has. So they badly need it for revenue, right? They need to put the boxes
in.
And
it was half flooded. It was half flooded, 4 years ago, where the entire lower bowl was flooded. So it did receive a lot of work, and it will need a lot of work just because of all the things that happen over the next few years. So maybe having the Olympic Games in Calgary is the way to get the Saddle Dome either renovated with a new coat of paint or totally outdone.
No, and they need to do that. I think it would be workable, as I said. Like, if you think of the 2010 games, they used, I know it is Pacific Coliseum. I forget, I don't know what it's called now in terms of branding of that, but where the Canucks played before they built the current rink, which, what's out? Rogers Place, I think. Anyway.
Yeah, it's Rogers Place, something.
Hard to keep track of whatever the corporate name is of the day, but at any rate, before they built the new rink.
It used to be the GM Place, and now I think you're right. I think it is that one.
Rogers something.
Yeah, Rogers.
At any rate, but they used the old rink for figure skating and for, I think, short track was there as well. So they would have the ability to do that. There's already tons of curling facilities that want to have their own one. It would be a cheap thing to do. Real quickly, exactly what happened this week is that the Calgary City Council voted in favor of continuing the bid. They needed to do this step now to sort of prepare the bid forward. Once they do that, they're reliant upon the provincial and federal government coming on board.
Which there was a misunderstanding earlier this week too, because Calgary outright said, "Yeah, we already have the support of the provincial and the federal level of government." And then a few hours later, we're just backtracking a bit. We don't have it yet, but we want it, and they told us we might have it. So that's where it is.
Well, we talked earlier today. We talked to Stephen Sandover, the 2026 United bid, this World Cup. And he said Albertans kind of have we'll figure that stuff out kind of attitude. So I don't doubt they would. And it's a federal election next year. So I suspect that might be something that the Liberal government does, is to support that a little bit there. And I can't imagine that anyone's going to be... The Calgary Flames situation is an interesting one. Calgary does not want to lose their hockey team, and they fear that they will if they don't build a new rink. So this is, as cynical as that is, that need is probably going to fuel a lot of this bid.
Yeah.
question I have is, is it too soon to go back and have another Winter Olympics in Canada just 16 years later?
No,
it's
never too soon. But are we the right judge of that? I don't think so, because
we're
biased.
It for sure. Salt Lake is already sort of bowed out too. So I think that we Canada would be the only bid from North America at that point. Back to back in Asia, we're coming off of. So
we won't be coming back to Asia for like 20 years. That's what's going to happen.
So it's really whether there's going to be a European bid come forward. And the two countries that I would look most carefully at for this is
Austria.
whether there can.
I have Innsbruck in my mind. I don't know why, but it just popped up when you're talking about it. Lillehammer, Innsbruck, something like one of those resort Winter Olympic sports focused cities.
I would say Oslo.
Oslo, there you go.
Oslo with the Lillehammer acting as the Alpine event. That you could look at if the Swedes could ever get support for a bid. There has never been a Winter Olympics in Sweden. There hasn't been an Olympics in Sweden since 1912. So there basically hasn't been an Olympics in Sweden of any modern sort of idea. That's I think a country that would get a lot of sentimental support if they were to do that. I think there would be a movement within the European vote bloc to go Europe if the opportunity were presented to them. But the problem with the Winter Olympics over the past few bidding cycles is that no one has been willing to put a bid forward that hasn't been from Beijing and Almaty and
Almaty. Can you imagine? We dodged the bullet there.
Yeah, well, I still would have voted Almaty over Beijing if I had to vote. But nonetheless, yes, it was the games no one wanted, and then the summer games no one wanted. So
Paris and L.A. There you go. That's where you got Paris and L.A. from, too.
Well, and that's the thing about this 26th bid. If Calgary, they've got to answer these questions carefully, and Canada does as well, because there's a good chance that they might just get them. There might not be a bid.
So, the phone rings next week. So, about 2026, how about we just give it to you? How about we just give you and you do whatever you want with it? How about this? We skip the entire process. You can have him.
Well, and there's another question, too. And I could see something like the L.A.-Paris situation happening. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that Oslo steps up and it's just Oslo versus Calgary. Then I think that the two bid companies should just get together and go, why don't we just ask the IOC to do what they did on the summer side? And we take one and we take the other. So 2030 is not, it's starting to seem surreal, like science fiction dates in my head, but I'll probably still be around then.
It's only 12 years. Duane, 2030 is 12 years away. Not that far.
I know. Oh, good God. Anyway.
Here's a way you can count it. It's 3 World Cups away and 6 Olympics away. Not that bad.
Yeah. So they might just flip like that, and I could see something like that. I do think there is a desire to have the Winter Olympics go back to Europe. It's been since Turin, obviously. So I guess, Sochi technically is in Europe, but Russia's its own thing in many ways. Yeah, that's a lot going on here, but certainly good steps from the Calgary standpoint. But it would be very interesting to see Canada as a major focal point of the world for 2026 for sure. If
with no white elephants, we're not going to be Rio. We're not going to host the Olympics and the World Cup in the same year and then not be able to feed our hungry. No, we can do it.
We're talking about Oslo, Calgary, basically, and I think that we haven't heard anything officially out in Norway about this, but they've certainly been making noise about it for a while. These are both former sites, and I think when you're looking at Winter Games, that's going to be the movement forward with them. No one's going to want to build new facilities for these Winter Olympics. They're expensive to build.
Not just that, all the places that really wanted them had them already. There's only so many hotbeds of winter sport in the entire world. So once those were taken care of, then it became a show of opulence by government or dictators around the world. Once that is over, and I were like, okay, what's left? All right, who wants second servings? I'm handing out second servings.
Yeah, I think Salt Lake is ripe to go back to. Even go back another generation from now, because I think they'll be reluctant to go quickly back into the same place, 12 years or 16 years away. But I could see them going back to Vancouver around the late 40s, if the Olympics are still going around then, right?
If the world is still here, yes, let's not think about that.
Okay, fair enough. All right.
Yeah, that wraps it up for today. Exactly. That wraps up our PyeongChang coverage as a whole. Thank you all for listening, for your comments, for interacting with us on social media. Our Five Rings podcast account has like tripled since the beginning of PyeongChang. Thank you for everyone who voted for us in one of the best Olympic podcasts, up there with PYC and NBC. Pretty good company. That was actually quite interesting. And well, we thank you a lot. And for Duane Rollins, I'm Kevin Laramee. You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. We're weekly from now on. Well, we've been for a little while, but we're weekly. We're going to transition slowly into summer sports, Commonwealth Games, and so on and so forth in the next few weeks. We'll be back next week with Five Rings. Until then, have a great Olympics.